gospel lesson this week comes from Mark 6, 30 through 34 and 53 through 56. The apostles returned to Jesus and told him everything they had done and taught. Many people were coming and going, so there was no time to eat. He said to the apostles, "Come by yourselves to a secluded place and rest for a while." They departed in a boat by themselves for a deserted place. Many people saw them leaving and recognized them, so they ran ahead from all the cities and arrived before them. When Jesus arrived and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. Then he began to teach them many things. When Jesus and his disciples had crossed the lake, they landed at Gennesaret, anchored the boat, and came ashore. People immediately recognized Jesus and ran around that whole region, bringing sick people on their mats to wherever they heard he was. So wherever he went, villages, cities, or farming communities, they would place the sick in the marketplaces and beg him to allow them to touch even the hem of his clothing. Everyone who touched him was healed. This ends the reading of the gospel. Praise be to God.
Free time. You'd think God has lots and lots of free time. Like it said, for God, a day for God is like 1,000 years for us. God is beyond time. But in today's scripture, Jesus certainly isn't beyond time, and they are being overloaded. They need some free time. Come away with me to a quiet place, he says. And the disciples give a sigh and hop in the boat and start pulling the oars and unfurling the sail, and they headed to a lonely place. But you know, Jesus had some fans. In fact, the crowds around Jesus, the way people clustered around him, remind me of in the 1960s when Beatlemania was flowing, and all those screaming girls wherever they went. John Lennon wasn't too off when he said the Beatles are more popular than Jesus at that time among those people, yes. But popularity wears thin. And they get to the lonely place, and they are not going to be lonely. And Jesus looks upon the people and has compassion. Looking for free time. Aren't we all? My goodness, how it changes in the summer. Whatever happened to summer vacation? What kid in here has ever laid on his back in the backyard looking at the stars, or not stars, at the clouds, and thinking, I am so bored, so bored. You know, kids don't get that anymore. They've got games to play, they've got camps to attend, they've got things to do, and it's just all taken away. There is no really free time. And we too struggle with having free time. I just saw a video that free time, leisure, is going to be more and more like work. There's more and more things we have to do for one reason or another, and it's just like work. We've got these jobs to get done, these things to get done. We got paid, but we got to get them done, and we're going nuts. No free time. Fellow was mentioning these video games. Now, I know most of you haven't played computer games that last 100 hours or more, or 100 days. They go on and on. And in those games, you have assignments to accomplish, you have things to find, you've got stuff to do to get points and experience and whatever it takes to win the game. And there's no freedom in that. It's work. They call it grinding. You have these epic moments, but most of the time you're just grinding. And that's what life gets to be like. And Jesus looks at the people, and he has compassion upon them. Trapped. These people, There's so many people, you'd think they all had a lot of free time, but that was not the case. What it was in the Galilee area. Most of those little subsistence farms that people had held on to for generations, for hundreds, maybe 1,000 years, were being bought up by Roman plantation owners. And the people no longer had a way to scratch a living out of the soil. They became day laborers. And that means they worked only when they were hired. They were hired only when it was profitable for the farmer. And so they had time to drag themselves and their family and their sick friends all to be with Jesus. Because while their lives weren't free, the time was pretty cheap, you see. And Jesus looks upon them, and he has compassion. A number of years ago, a young person, a youth, was reading that passage about the man who laid by the pool, crippled man. He laid by the pool, and he'd been there for over 30 years because he never got into it in time at the right moment. And the youth had the Bible, and it says, there was this invalid man, and suddenly we knew it should have been an invalid man, but it hit me there. All of us. Invalid means invalid. These people that Jesus is having compassion for, they are not just sick and sin-filled and demon-possessed. They are invalid. They are poor. They live in the midst of a world where they are reduced to nothing. They are undernourished, and should they scratch themselves sometime, they get all that filth for everything around them. They get an infection. They die by the time they're 40. A short, miserable, hard life. Invalid. Parents who have children who don't turn out normal know that feeling of the invalid invalid. A parent who has a Down syndrome child, or one who becomes autistic or blind or deaf, or any of a number of things that make that child not normal. You never hear the parent praying, oh Lord, give me a child who has struggles emotionally, physically, or mentally. No, we want our children to be good, have good, healthy lives, normal. And so when a parent has a child like this, the first thought is that this child has an illness. A fellow by the name of Andrew Solomon did some studies on the parents, the families of deaf children. He saw that the first thing that parents want, and this is true for all the other ways a child is less than normal or not normal, the first thing that they want is that the illness be cured. We've got to fix this problem so they can be normal. We've got to educate them or find some procedure or do something to make them normal. But the fact is that no matter how much they get in help, they'll never reach normal. And as long as they are held as ill people, somebody who is a problem, has a problem, they will be a problem, and their lives will be invalid. That goes for people who are different from us in other ways, in action and orientation. I hesitate to tell you this. When I was in grade school, I was a self-avowed practicing sissy. Okay? I was teased. I was beaten. They took my name. And they said, he's not more man, he's more mouse. Then they just shortened it to mouse. And I hated that name. We moved away. We moved from our little town to a bigger town where I had more choices, more people to get to know. And I left that name, that hated name, behind me. because I know what it's like to be on the wrong end of that stick. I don't care what the Bible says. When we name somebody as somehow less than normal, they don't live up to the expectations of their parents, their neighborhoods, their families, their world, and we call them diseased or ill or invalids, well, it feels a lot like being bullied, because it is. Now, most children do grow up, and in one way or the other they do like I did. They get someplace else and they find people like themselves. Deaf people find associations. So do the blind, and so do others. They find people like themselves, and at first they discover that they're not as weird as everyone said. That this is a life. That they aren't just invalid, they have real, honest identities of being who they are. This grows from just a support group into a full recognition of who you really are, and looks beyond the outside. Beyond this, into the skin, or into the muscle, into the hopes and hearts themselves. They have an opportunity to discover what love is. My ministry has been bouncing me from little town to little town to little town. I think God had something in mind. I think what God had in mind was not that I would taunt and rave about how small town people are, but that I would discover that every single one of us is invalid in one way or another in our hearts. None of us attain that perfection we were expected to have as children. All of us are broken and dented. The word sin has been mutated into something you did that was wrong. No, sin is that feeling that you're not ever going to be normal. You're always going to have a struggle. And after town, I learned that those guys who were the bullies when I was a kid, they were struggling from exactly the same thing. And Jesus looked upon them, and he had compassion. We're all hurting. We all need someone or something in our lives to give us that validity, to give us that wholeness, to give us that self-identity, whatever. So we know we are us, and we are each ourselves, and as such we are okay. For most people, for a large number of people, maybe for you, it's the spouse. Now that spouse will drive you to distraction, and sometimes you want to, hurt them. But you can't live without them. And you know that when they're not by your side, you are lessened. And it's the most wonderful thing we have in this world to convey what God means by love. God's love is not icky, sweetie, unicorns and rainbows. It's not just pleasure and fun. It's living with somebody who loves you and you love them anyway. And so I am glad that we no longer have any barriers to anybody, legal barriers to having that kind of relationship. We're humans. And Jesus looks upon us and has compassion. That's the whole point. There's something about Jesus. He had the miracle touch. He was the magic man. No, he wasn't. If people came and it was that he said to them, Your faith has made you whole. He touched them. And his love flowed out of him. He was literally glowing with love. They touched him, just the hem of his robe. And that love flowed into them. Now, I'm here to tell you, it's not about magic Jesus. If it was, then we're all out of luck, because Jesus ascended to heaven 2,000 years ago. We don't have any of that magic touch. What we do have is the love that Jesus came to show. This is a sign, this is a symbol, this is a truth. That love will change everything, and all you have to do is be in the shadow of the holy as he walks by. That love changes everything. You may know that. It changes your world. It changes your relationship. It changes your time. Your time is no longer, I'm so bored, or rush, 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 not to be bored. Your time is real, and it's holy, and it's valuable, and so are you. You are part of God. God is part of you. You are free in the time that God gives you. And that is the meaning of free time.